Good evening, everybody. We're coming to you from the swamp, Washington, D.C., and I can tell you we come here rarely and only for the most important of reasons, and that is to speak today with President Trump. President Trump promised voters to drain the swamp, but he's also finding the swamp filled with creatures who are more cunning, more elusive, and more dangerous than even he expected when he was campaigning for the job he now holds. Washington, D.C. is driven by a vast number of political and economic dynamics. Corruption of all kinds is high on that list. The president wants to end that corruption, but first he has to limit it. And that means the Trump presidency is now focused on transformative legislation to cut taxes, to grow both our middle class and the economy itself. The president's tax reform proposal is at the center of the storm that is sweeping Capitol Hill, K Street, and yes, the White House itself. But if the president can pull it all off, he will have delivered a brilliant political stroke that will boost and bolster big business and small and reverse what has been a 2-decade-long shrinkage of our middle class. And President Trump intends to revive and restore the fate and fortunes of not only our middle class, but all Americans who aspire to it. In 9 months in office, you've already accomplished more in the way of job creation. The move in the equities markets has been extraordinary and record-setting. All of the indexes at or near record levels. You have accomplished so much in that 9 months, and yet, as you say, we need tax reform. You're meeting resistance from within your own party. You're meeting resistance from the Democrats. How do you move from here?
Well, I think we're going to get it. I think the senators are going to come together. I think the House is looking really good. You know, they're passing this bill along very rapidly. In fact, that's going to happen hopefully today. And I did make a couple of calls. I said, fellas, please, no changes. Just pass it along. We have to get tax cuts. And just pass it along. Now, normally they want to make their 15 points or their 20 points, and then it has to go back and has to be revoted and everything else. I said, just pass it along. And they said, I think we're going to do that. And let's see what happens. But I think they're going to do that. And so, look, we have actually in the Republican Party, in a true sense, we have great unity. Look at the Democrats with Bernie Sanders, who got absolutely taken advantage of by the DNC. And now you see that, you know, all the stuff coming out, you see what's happening. Right. But you look at Hillary and Bernie, that's big league stuff. We have very, very minor. We have great unity. I was with the Senate yesterday, the entire Republican Senate. And other than two people, I tell you, there was a lot of love in that room.
A lot of love and a lot to get done.
A lot to get done. Yeah.
And tax reform is critical because of what you have established as the standard now for economic growth under the Trump presidency. Tax reform is going to be absolutely critical to driving that growth, job creation, and bringing capital back, which you've been talking about for 2 years before you were elected.
For many years.
Absolutely.
Hey, for many years before.
So where do we go in terms of capital repatriation for corporate America? How do you incentivize corporations to get back to America with all of that money for investment in jobs, plant, equipment, research and development?
So we have many things. Number one, we're bringing the corporate rate down to 20% from 35%. That's a massive. This will be the biggest tax cut in history, in the history of our country, and that's great. And we need it because right now our country's about the highest taxed, or certainly one of the highest taxed in the world, and we can't have that. So we're going to have a country that's toward the lower end. I can't say it's the lowest. You know, Ireland is going now lower, and others are going lower. They played the game a lot better than our people have played the game, I can tell you that. But we're going to have a country that's going to have tax incentive now, and we are going to bring back, you know, I've been talking, and I even heard you say it not so long ago, $2.5 trillion, but you and I have both been using that number for years.
A conservative
that number is much higher now because it's, you know, built up over the years. And I would be surprised if it weren't close to $4 trillion. That money's coming back. And nobody would bring it back now because the tax is so astronomical, they'd have to be desperate to bring it back. I mean, any company that would bring it back and pay the tax that they'd have to pay, which probably ends up being close to 40%, who's going to pay that to bring money back in? So what they do is they leave the money in these other places and other countries, and they spend it there, and they create a lot of additional wealth there. We want the money coming back here. But it could be $4 trillion, and what we're doing is substantially lowering the tax, and we're also getting rid of all of the bureaucratic hurdles. It wasn't just a tax. I have friends that want to bring money back. The amount of work they have to do to get the approval to bring the money back is absolutely ridiculous, so that's going away also.
And the middle class, you say this is for the middle class and small business, and the pass-through rates are all very attractive. What do you expect the impact to be for working men and women, the middle class, those who aspire to be in the middle class?
You know, we've done so well, pretty much record-setting, certainly record-setting for 9 months in so many different ways, 9 months of a presidency. But you look at the market, how well it's doing. So you'd say, well, why do you have to do anything? We can actually do better, and I think we will do better. We are going to have so many jobs created by what we're doing. And, you know, we're going to have companies that aren't going to be leaving our country anymore. You look at what's happened over the last 25 years. You go down and take a look at Mexico and see how many car companies have built these massive factories in Mexico. Not here. We want them built in Michigan and Ohio and our places. And they just leave, and they fire everybody, and they go and open up plants. That's not going to be happening anymore. Plus, they're going to be penalized in many different ways. They do it.
You're the first president to talk openly and honestly about offshoring of production, the outsourcing of jobs, millions of jobs.
It's terrible.
That have begun under your administration to come back to the country. The idea that made in America, buy in America, hire in America, how likely is it that that can actually be realized with a business community that has fought those on the wrong side of those issues for a very long time?
Well, you're right, and it's surprising to me. For instance, NAFTA is a horrible agreement, one of the worst trade deals ever. It's just one of the worst, although TPP, which I terminated before it got signed, before it got finished, someday, hopefully, people will be thanking. That would have been one of the great disasters of all times in terms of trade. And a lot of people understand that, but a lot of people don't. But I was very honored to have just terminated that. And we'll do bilateral deals with all those countries. We'll do it great. And if they don't treat us properly, we'll do a termination, or we'll do whatever we want to do. These deals, once you get into them.
How likely is it that there will be a resolution on NAFTA in these current negotiations?
Okay, so I would say this. In order to have a resolution, because right now Mexico and Canada have such a great deal, it's so good that it's very hard for them to get used to the fact that it can't be that way anymore. And as you know, Mexico has an election coming up, and they have a number of people that are running, and they're very pro-Mexico, which is, in fact, they wear a hat, a green hat that says "Make Mexico Great Again." They call them the Donald Trump of politics. They have a couple of them, actually. And it's very hard. I said, you negotiate. I tell my people, I say, right now, it's going to be very hard. And in my opinion, in order to make a fair deal with NAFTA, you have to terminate the deal, and you have to see where you're going to come. And we'll come out. But I think you have to give them, to make a fair deal and a great deal, and you see what's going on. We're being very tough, and we're being very fair. But we have to get back a lot. What's happened to this country with NAFTA is unbelievable. The jobs that have been taken, the factories that are moving out of Michigan, out of Ohio, out of Pennsylvania, out of our states is incredible. So what are the chances? I think the chances ultimately are good. But right now, I think my people are going to have to get tougher.
And
I told them that.
So as you look at an agreement that has, by the most conservative estimates, cost the United States $1 trillion over the course of the past 23 years since its inception.
Well, look at it a different way.
Okay.
We have a trade deficit with Mexico.
Right.
Mexico's wonderful. But we have a trade deficit with Mexico of $71 billion a year. This is Mexico. We're not talking about China, which is much worse.
Right.
We have a trade deficit right now with Mexico of $71 billion. People can't believe it. We have trade deficits. Well, we have trade deficits with almost everybody. But we're changing that.
When you focus first on free trade, people, oh my gosh, he's talking like an isolationist, a protectionist. And then they started looking at the numbers to see that we are, amongst all of our trading partners, that this country is the only one who said, please take what you want. We don't have to have a mature, intelligent relationship with you. We don't have to have balanced trade. Every other major partner does precisely that.
The WTO, World Trade Organization, was set up for the benefit of everybody but us.
Right.
They have taken advantage of this country like you wouldn't believe. And I say to my people, you tell them. Like, as an example, we lose all the lawsuits, almost all of the lawsuits in the WTO, within the WTO, because we have fewer judges than other countries. It's set up. You can't win. In other words, the panels are set up so that we don't have majorities. It was set up for the benefit of taking advantage of the United States. NAFTA, and I tell people, and I tell good people, they hear me, I'm going to be very tough with NAFTA, right. But they hear I'm getting tough with it. They say, oh, please don't touch it. And I say, listen, I'm going to make the deal better. Oh, don't touch it. I said, supposing I don't terminate it, but I make it better. Oh, don't touch it. And I say, why would they not want me to make it better? Even if, assuming you leave it the way it is, which we may or we may not. It depends how the negotiation turns out. We may not. But look, they don't even want you to touch it, even if you tell them we're going to make it better. Then you say to yourself, what's going on? And then you say, well, they must be on the other side of the deal, too. Mm-hmm. And they are. They have companies that have factories in Mexico.
U.S.
But I'm not interested in that. I'm interested here.
Here, America first. So how does President Trump feel about the bombshell revelations that the Democratic National Committee and the Democratic nominees' campaign are the ones who funded the smear campaign against presidential candidate Donald Trump, the man who would go on to win the presidency?
Don't forget, Hillary Clinton totally denied this. She didn't know anything. She knew nothing. All of a sudden it found out. What I was amazed at, it's almost $6 million that they paid, and it's totally discredited. It's a total phony. I call it fake news. It's disgraceful. It's disgraceful.
We'll be right back with a man who almost single-handedly is changing the direction of this country and changing it for the better. We continue live from Washington, D.C. Stay with us. We're coming to you tonight, as you can well see, here in Washington, D.C., where the president and I sat down in the cabinet room of the White House to hear his thoughts about tax reform, an economy that he has spurred to better than 3% growth over the past 6 months, markets that have added more than $5 trillion in market cap since he was elected president. And the president today showed no sign of either slowing down or being overmatched in any way by any politician or opposing institution that would deny him his vision for our country's future. Now the president's thoughts on Hillary Clinton, the democratically funded and discredited dossier contrived and paid for by the Democratic National Committee and the Clinton campaign. You're obviously enthused about what you're going to get done. You've got to be immensely gratified at what you've been able to do, often with a recalcitrant Congress and Senate. Going forward, there's another wall, and there's a wall that's just fallen between the American public, the Democratic National Committee, and Hillary Clinton's campaign. Right. They funded something called the Trump dossier, which they ballyhooed for some time. We now know who paid for it, the DNC and Hillary Clinton, and one as yet unnamed Republican. You want to
wonder who that might be?
Do you have a sense?
I think I know, but I'll let them find out. They're going to find out eventually, just like they did. Don't forget, Hillary Clinton totally denied this. She didn't know anything. She knew nothing. All of a sudden it found out. What I was amazed at, it's almost $6 million that they paid, and it's totally discredited. It's a total phony. I call it fake news. It's disgraceful. It's disgraceful.
I think her word that she likes to use that's so serviceable about that dossier, debunked. It's been debunked.
Well, and then I understand recently she said, well, opposition research is very standard. So, it's very interesting. She denied it. Her own people denied it. Everybody denied it. And now they're sort of scooting around trying to figure out what to say. So they spent, if you think of it, almost $6 million on something like that. And I think, honestly, I just think it's a disgrace.
And contemporaneously, suddenly the House Intelligence Committee, the House Oversight Committee are turning to the Democratic Party and but beginning the investigation of something called collusion with the Russians.
That's the real collusion. Believe me.
Your thoughts?
There was no collusion on my side, I can tell you that.
Right.
Everybody knew it. You knew it because you were saying it when it was not in vogue. But I always said, and I had no idea how right I was because I didn't realize it would be to this extent.
Right.
But I always said this was an excuse for losing the election put out by the Democrats, and that's what it was. But then when you hear the kind of money they spent, and when you see all of the things about Podesta, and you see all of the relationships that they actually have with Russia, and you see in ours, you know, one thing that is interesting, and I have to say, even the Democrats, they walk out of those meetings and they say, no, there is no collusion, and we haven't found any yet, but we'll keep going.
Right.
A wonderful man came to my office a week ago, a very highly respected man, and he sat down and he said, you know, it's been very unfair. From the day you have been president, you've been under this little veil of Russia, Russia, Russia. Mm-hmm. Now, with all of this being said, I want to say this. I think it would be great if we got along with Russia. I don't think there's anything wrong with getting, you know, they are a power, they're a nuclear power. I think we could have a good relationship. I think the North Korean situation would be easier settled. I just spoke to the president of China. Right. I congratulated him on his big victory. But it would be wonderful if we could speak to China and Russia, because China is helping us, and maybe Russia's going through the other way and hurting what we're getting. I mean, when I say maybe, I think I know exactly what I'm talking about. If we had a relationship with Russia, that would be a good thing, not a bad thing.
Relationships, you were criticized for even trying to court, if you will, President Xi of China. Everyone, the so-called intelligentsia of this country's foreign policy establishment, said you're wasting your time. It just can't be done. And obviously, you've made significant progress with him. And
just spoke to him a few minutes ago, just before I walked into the room. You know, something has been given to him that's never been, it's really virtually never happened in China. He's been given powers that nobody's
and written into the Constitution.
He's a powerful man. I happen to think he's a very good person. Mm-hmm. Now, with that being said, he represents China. I represent the USA. So, you know, there's going to always be conflict, but we have a very good relationship. People say we have the best relationship of any president, because he's called president also. Now some people might call him the king of China, but he's called president. But we have a very good relationship, and that's a positive thing. And it would be good to have that relationship with Russia and other countries too. Hopefully
the whole world. Anything to report to America on your conversation with President Xi?
No, but I'll be going there in 2 weeks, and we'll go to Beijing and other places, wherever he'd like to take me, and we'll be spending 2 days there, and we're going also to Japan and South Korea, and it will be, I think, hopefully it's historic and positive, and we have to solve the North Korea problem. It's a very big problem. It should have never been given to me. This should have been solved long before I came to office, when it would have been easier to solve. But it was given to me, and I get it solved. I solve problems. I'm very happy with the way the markets are going. I'm very happy with, you know, all of the regulation cuts and all of the things we've done, and that's what's driving the markets.
And up next, as we continue our conversation with the president, he talks about taking on the GOP establishment, Democrats, the left-wing media, the deep state, and of course all of them at the same time, just to make it fair.
I came in, I said, I'm going to fight like hell. I didn't realize it's even more so than I thought. But that's the way it is, and that's good.
Also, a very big hint from the president about who he will choose to lead the Fed when we come back live tonight from Washington, D.C. We're tonight in the capital of the country, Washington, D.C., also variously known as the Swamp. Today, I talked with the president about all that he has achieved in the first 9 months of his presidency, his thoughts on those who attack him relentlessly and those who admire him greatly. His thoughts on Hillary Clinton and the dossier. Here is more of our conversation today. We begin with the president's thoughts about a major decision he will make in a matter of days. Who will be the next chief of the Federal Reserve? You're nearing a decision on who will chair the Fed?
I am.
Any hints?
So I really have it down to 2 and maybe 3 people, and I think over the next very short period of time I'll be announcing it. It won't be a big shock. You know, it's sort of interesting the way it comes out, and you've been talking about the various people on your show, which I watch absolutely almost all the time, even if it means TiVo or whatever device you happen to be using at the time.
We appreciate it.
But no, your show is fantastic. So I'll be announcing this over the next pretty short period of time.
All right. And
do you have a preference out of curiosity?
I do, and
tell me who your preference is.
I think I constrain myself because an ad hoc advisor to the president.
No, but I'd love to hear it. You can even cut it out if you want. You don't have to. I would love to hear you. I only want that from people I respect.
I personally believe that Janet Yellen might be worth keeping.
I'll tell you what, she was in my office 3 days ago. She was very impressive. I like her a lot. I mean, it's somebody that I am thinking about. I would certainly think about it. In one way, I have to say...
I haven't been utterly rejected.
No. In one way, I have to say you like to make your own mark.
Right.
You understand that.
Absolutely.
You like to make your own mark, which is maybe one of the things she's got a little bit against her. But I think she's terrific. We had a great talk, and we're obviously doing very well together. If you look at the markets.
And I'm saying that, by the way, not being any fan of interest rate hikes by the Fed here, and as have been discussed since December of 2015. I have to ask you in conclusion, and I really appreciate your time, as does our audience. You came into this job fighting like hell, and you are fighting like hell every day.
More than I thought. I came in, I said, I'm going to fight like hell. I didn't realize it's even more so than I thought. But that's the way it is, and that's good.
And I've got to ask you, I mean, you're one of the most, I would say, by the left particularly, reviled, even hated men to ever hold your post.
I would say so.
You're also one of the most loved and respected.
I would say that also.
In history. And how does that feel? Where is Donald Trump today as you are just now beginning your presidency?
So the one thing that I really thought, because I thought I was treated very unfairly by the press during the campaign. And when I won, I said, the good news is now they'll start treating me well. But they got much worse. Lou, they put on stories on CNN and on NBC, and CBS and ABC, and NBC being an offshoot also with the MSNBC, which is ridiculous. They put on stories that are so false. They have so-called sources that, in my opinion, don't exist. You know, they'll say, sources have said. They're sitting down, they make it up. It is so dishonest. It is so fake. And, you know, I have come up with some pretty good names for people. I think one of the best names is, you know, I've really started this whole fake news thing. Now, they've turned it around, and then now they're calling, you know, stories put out by Facebook fake, and they're fake. What could be more fake than CBS and NBC and ABC and CNN? When you look at some of these stories, and when you look at the amount of negative, I know when I do well and when I do badly. I know a good story from a bad story. But when you have a really good story and they make it bad, I'll say to my wife, oh, tonight I'm going to enjoy watching television because I did great. And wait till you see this. And then they put it on and it's like, oh, that's not so good. They are fake news. And the good thing about social media is that I have so many millions of people, so many, I guess 128 million. You could add up, you know, you add up all the different platforms. Massive social media. At least I can put out. It's not that I want to do that. I'd rather not do it. I would love to not do it at all. But at least I can put out the truth and I can put out the real word. And people agree. And if you look at the level of approval of media, of general media, if you look at it from the day I started running to now, I'm so proud that I have been able to convince people how fake it is, because it has taken a nosedive.
Yeah.
Except for your show, of course, and Sean and a few of them, right?
You got it.
There's some very good ones. And I have to say, Fox has treated me fairly. And I don't mean good, but they've treated me fairly. I don't want to be treated good. I just want to be treated fairly.
Well, you are, if I may say, everything is advertised as you ran for president, and appreciate everything you're doing. Thanks so much.
We're getting it done. I will promise you we're getting it done. And it's happened. A lot has already happened. Thank you very much. It's an honor.
Mr. President, thank you.
Thank you.
Up next, more provocations by North Korea. President Trump ready to head to Asia on a very important trip.
And we have to solve the North Korea problem.
Right.
It's a very big problem. It should have never been given to me. This should have been solved long before I came to office, when it would have been easier to solve.
Former CIA analyst Fred Fleitz says China could hold the key to containing Kim Jong-un. He joins us here next in Washington. We'll see what he thinks about the CIA, the FBI. We'll be right back. The Trump administration turning up the heat on North Korea. The Treasury Department placing new sanctions against the North Korean government and military for human rights abuses. Also, the USS Nimitz is now in the Western Pacific, joining the Roosevelt and the Reagan, 3 carriers now on station. It is the first time in a decade that the Navy has had 3 aircraft carriers in the region. Joining me now, Fred Fleitz, former CIA analyst, Chief of Staff to Ambassador John Bolton, now a Senior Vice President at the Center for Security Policy, and it is great to have you here, Fred.
Welcome to the Swamp, Lou.
Oh, thank you very much. I have the pleasure of saying it's merely a visit. Let me turn to one of the reasons why it's easy for me to say that. This is the swamp at work tonight, making a liar out of the President of the United States, refusing the heads of the CIA and the FBI to follow the law, to follow the orders of the President of the United States, elected by the people of this country. Why in hell should the American people put up with the insult, the affront, and simply the capricious arrogance of two heads of agencies whose agents and service members deserve a hell of a lot better?
Lou, I can't conceive of legitimate reasons not to release all these JFK files. I hear it could be the names of sources, the names of investigators, sources and methods. I imagine these people are long dead. But I got to tell you, I trust Mike Pompeo. I imagine there's a good reason if he recommended to the president that this not be released. And if there is good reason, it better be made clear to Congress tomorrow.
I don't want to put you in this position because you're defending a man you like.
No, I know him well. I can't imagine he would recommend this if he didn't think there was a good reason.
Well, I'm going to suggest to you a better reason. It's called a constitution. It's called a government that is a constitutional republic. And I think people in this town, and I'm speaking broadly because I believe broadly this is an issue here. I think they've forgotten who they work for, the American people. Our right to know is being denied even when the President of the United States orders the government to deliver. That is a big damn deal, Fred.
No,
and in this town, it
right.
means almost apparently nothing.
Well, there better be a damn good reason. And I can't imagine what it is. And as I said, if Mr. Pompeo has such a reason, he better be on the Hill tomorrow to explain what it is.
Yeah, I don't know if the Hill is enough, frankly. I think they better just do what the hell the president says. There is a time to salute, and I would guess this is that time. Just as the men and women on those carriers in the Western Pacific will be saluted. How can you ask any American to trust this government with the conduct of those 2 agencies today?
I'm very concerned about the way the CIA has behaved, especially in the last year during the campaign. There's a lot of swamp draining to go on out there. It hasn't taken place yet. I'm very concerned about that. I've spoken to Mr. Pompeo about it. I mean, I think that there was one...
Well, does he give a damn?
I think he gives a damn. I think he's actually doing things to fix the place. I'd like to see much more be done. Maybe they should fire the first 3 floors of the building. I mean, there's...
How many floors are in the building?
7 floors.
I think 7 would be a good start. Fred, let's talk about North Korea very quickly if we can. It appears that this president is preparing us for the prospect of military conflict and intervention against North Korea. Your read on how dire the situation is and how likely is military intervention?
Well, first of all, the president is following up his tough words with a measured military response by sending 2 additional aircraft carriers, by putting our B-52s on 24-hour notice. This doesn't mean we're going to attack, but he's making it clear to North Korea, testing hydrogen bombs is unacceptable, firing missiles over Japan is unacceptable, and I am going to back up my words with force if necessary.
And if this president gives an order to the United States military, do you think it'll be followed?
Yes, I do.
Then why in the world are our intelligence agencies at war with this president and not following his orders?
I think there's a lot of work to be done to reform our intelligence agencies.
We don't have time. We've got B-52s on 24-hour ready notice. We have intelligence agencies that say we'll see you in 6 months. To the President of the United States.
Well, I think that, no, I agree with you. There's a real conflict there, but I think our military is going to follow the orders of the President. Most of our intelligence agencies, the vast majority of our intelligence people are loyal. They do what they serve the President, they serve this country, but I agree there is a problem with a small minority that have been not acting in the national interest.
And 2 of them run 2 very important agencies, the FBI and the CIA, in my opinion. Fred, thanks very much. Fred Fleitz. Good to see you as always. Up next, President Trump's border wall prototypes officially unveiled. We'll have that.
We're going to take a look at the wall, and we're going to get it built, and it's going to be quite the wall. It's going to be very effective.
Mr. Trump's focus on border security next. Byron York joins me live tonight from Washington, D.C. We'll be back right after the break. It'll be a very quick break. Stay with us. Welcome back, and thank you for joining us. We're coming to you live from Washington, D.C. We're getting closer and closer to seeing that border wall along our southern border. Earlier today, 8 border wall prototypes were unveiled, the 30-foot tall, 30-foot wide prototypes, now undergoing a series of tests. That's happening over the next 30 to 60 days. And joining me tonight, chief political correspondent with the Washington Examiner, Fox business contributor, Byron York. Byron, great to have you here.
Thanks for having me, Lou.
Aren't those beautiful prototypes?
They look darned effective.
They
too,
do.
You know, when you see some of the things that are along the border, which is just rickety pieces of metal that people can easily jump over,
a few strands of barbed wire,
or what are called vehicle fences, which are just bollocks placed here and there, and you can just walk through them. I mean, a large part of the border is like that. So if the president is able to get the money to do it, because remember there was
Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell. They're going to do the right thing. They're pals. They're buds.
I knew you had faith in them. That's good. But you know, the president really already has the legal authority to do this. Congress passed a law called the Secure Fence Act in 2006, and it's still there.
I can still remember Duncan Hunter and Dana Rohrabacher talking to me 2006, telling me about, you know, they're going to build a 700 miles of border because they got the president's guarantee that would happen.
Yes.
The guarantee never did deliver.
The problem has always been there is a bipartisan consensus against enforcing some of our immigration law. And
there's
the
a
Secure
bipartisan
Fence Act
consensus in this town to never do what you say and do as little as possible. And if you have to cheat, lie, or steal, stand by, because one of those 3 will happen.
Because they passed that Secure Fence Act in 2006 and said the administration shall do this, and the next year they changed it to may. And it ain't got done.
Isn't that extraordinary? But at least they were paying attention to the language and had the integrity to change it before ignoring it. In the case of the CIA leadership and the FBI, no integrity of any kind.
Well, you know, I think what we're seeing here is similar to what we saw with the Iran nuclear deal, which is the president campaigned on getting rid of this deal. He said it over and over.
The president 5 days ago said, It's going to happen
I'm going to release these Kennedy files, right? And now he's going to leave some of them. He's going to release some of them now and leave some of them for 180 days.
Time. So I've got to ask you this.
Yeah.
Why should anyone have any faith in the CIA and the FBI, who are ignoring the will of the people as expressed by the votes and the passage of law by Congress and the Senate and the orders of the President of the United States? And why is there any reason not to be alarmed at the state of what is an intelligence community apparently at war with the duly elected President of the United States?
I think people should be alarmed. Congress passed a law 25 years ago that said on this day these would be released. I think it's hard to imagine any argument that 54 years after the assassination they cannot be released.
And as Fred Flint said, we've still got a few hours.
There's time.
Fred is an optimist. Great to see you.
Thanks
so
you,
much,
Lou.
as always.
Good to be here.
Up next, President Trump issuing a warning to our NAFTA trade partners.
Mexico and Canada have such a great deal. It's so good that it's very hard for them to get used to the fact that it can't be that way anymore.
The administration's top official on all things trade and business, Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross, joins us here next. We're live from our nation's capital. Joining us tonight, Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross, who is, amongst everything else in all of his accomplishments, a great American, a terrific friend. Good to see you.
Good to see you, Lou.
And you've got so much work, and you're doing so much, as the entire administration. Let's talk with the president's upcoming trip to Asia, how important that is to the agenda, to creating balanced trade and to building important partnerships.
Well, I think it's important on both scores. A lot of people in Asia had the mistaken impression that when we pulled out of TPP, we were pulling out of the region. Nothing could be further from the truth. And if this trip doesn't say that eloquently, I don't know what could.
And in China, President Xi Jinping now, he is firmly ensconced in China's leadership for some time to come. He's the man. Is he going to be helpful in your judgment? Is his new, stronger position and role, is it helpful, or is it a negative for the prospects for a better relationship?
My guess is it's a positive, given that he has a very good personal relationship with President Trump. That, I think, is going to be the determining factor. There are already very good signs that he's being more helpful with North Korea. They did vote for the last two sanctions. As far as we can tell, they're enforcing them much more stringently than they were before. So those are very good signs.
And you're going to be there, I understand, for at least the Chinese portion of the discussions the president will be leading. I want to turn, if I may, to another part of what has been another productive day for this town, a rare productive day for Capitol Hill, but passing a $4 trillion budget. Talking with Kevin Brady, the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee. I assume you guys have gotten to know each other very well.
Yes, indeed.
He's obviously excited, and in 2 weeks looking at the markup of tax reform. Your idea about whether that is in prospect or in trouble?
I think it's in prospect. I think the vote today told you that. They didn't put any amendments at all. They took it exactly as it came from the Senate, even though they had been talking about quite a few amendments. The only reason they would have had for doing that is to grease the skids for the tax bill. And I think the negative votes that came were probably mostly over the deductibility of state and local.
Yeah, and Chairman Brady made it clear to me tonight that he and the president have more talking to do, whether it be 401k plans or whether it be the deduction of state and local taxes. A little chatting still to be done.
Well, I think the president was wise to come with a framework rather than a fully blown bill, because at the end of the day, it's the Congress that's going to write the bills anyway. So that simply would have delayed things and given more controversy to them. So I think the strategy was right.
Well, as the Secretary of Commerce, you're doing a pretty good job, I would like to say. We are watching 3% growth in the second quarter, likely to do as well, it seems, for the third. You've got amazing job creation. Business is eager to get things going with tax reform. Congratulations.
Well, it's the president who should get the congratulations.
I thought I'd test you on that.
It's his programs that we're trying to implement.
Well, it is an extraordinary. You have to go back to Bill Clinton's administration. You've got to go back 30 years to find any kind of achievement at this level. That's a remarkable.
Well, it is, and in the most recent quarter, I think we would have been well over 3%, except for the hurricanes.
You know, you'd think you're a member of the Trump administration. Mr. Secretary, thank you so much. And we thank all of you for joining.
A bloody battle for independence.